Hello everyone and welcome to the first Q&A of 2022 with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is a pleasure to have you with me all this afternoon, and I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas and a happy and safe and peaceful New Year despite everything going on in the world. You can see here that we are still in festive mode behind me with still some fairy lights twinkling away, which may or may not, depending on what you think, remain a permanent feature of the famous clock beside me. It's certainly giving me a lot of joy and the family as well, and I hope it does to you too. So we are getting stuck in with some of your great questions that have been coming in over the Christmas period. Even during the Christmas festivities, there is no respite to your thirst for knowledge about the ancient world. It's been great to see all your fantastic questions coming in. Hello Tracy, hello Catherine, thank you so much indeed for joining. And we're going to kick off with a question that was actually asked live last time, but I didn't have a chance to respond in full, and that was from James Watts. A very suitable question for the time of year. James was asking about, apart from Saturnalia, the kind of festival where the Romans tipped everything on its head and did everything the inverse way round. So famously, masters served their slaves for one day to, of course, reinforce the natural order of things as to the way stuff should be normally. But apart from that, and of course then Christmas, did any other kind of ancient religious festivals venerate the midwinter solstice? So we were talking about a couple of Q&As before. We were talking about the midsummer solstice and some of the things that seem to happen around the midsummer solstice. And we thought about some of the stuff that they did in the Greek world and the Roman world, the Chinese world. Even the ancient Vikings considered, if you remember, the midsummer solstice a good time to get together and discuss cases of law. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Miriam. Hello, Benjamin. Thank you so much indeed, everyone, for tuning in. Fantastic to see you all here. Welcome, welcome, welcome indeed, and Happy New Year indeed. So now the question coming in from James is about the midwinter solstice around, of course, as we would have it today, the 21st of December. Now, what did the Romans do with this? Well, before about the 3rd century AD, they didn't celebrate something so directly associated with the midwinter solstice. They did Saturnalia beforehand, and then they had the festival of Calends afterwards, between January 1st and January 5th, celebrating, obviously, that was their New Year festival. So they sort of went either side of the midwinter solstice. But in the 3rd century AD, the late 3rd century AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian instituted a new festival that was specifically supposed to be associated with the midwinter solstice. And this was the celebration of the birth of the invincible sun. The sun, not the Son of God, as would then become, obviously, but of the sun, as in the sun in the sky. And it was decided that the date for the celebration of this event should be the 25th of December. Now, there's a slight problem because the calendars that they were using at the time were basically increasingly each year got slightly out of whack with actually when the midwinter solstice happens, as we can now calculate it from an astronomical viewpoint, exactly dependent on the Earth turns, etc. And so they were getting a bit out of whack with it. But December 25th was the date decided for the birth of the invincible sun. And it was that celebration during then the following century, the 4th century CE, as early Christian kind of authority began to kind of reign across the Roman Empire. And they were looking for a date to fix for the particular celebration of the birth of Jesus. It made great sense then to pick December 25th as the particular day to celebrate the birth of Jesus. So there we go. Kind of a whole series of excellent midwinter celebrations, sort of and around about the time of the midwinter solstice. And of course, the Romans weren't the only ones doing it. The Egyptians were also, of course, in on the matter, with midwinter solstice being, again, also a time for the celebration of their sun god. In fact, on when they thought the midwinter solstice was happening, which was actually January the 6th, which is another kind of key date that's been picked up in Christian calendar as well. And that was also, the midwinter solstice was also the birth of Osiris. So lots going on in the midsummer and in the midwinter. Don't you feel guilty now that at the midwinter solstice you were sitting back with an eggnog latte from Starbucks in your hand or some such? I know I was. One of my favourite Christmas tipples, and doing very little indeed. Well, or at least attempting to do very little Indeed. So thank you, James, for your question, and hello to everyone. Hello, Nicola. Hello, Alan. Hello, Sarah. Hello. Snowy Scotland. Wow, you've got snow up there, you lucky devils. It was freezing cold here in Oxfordshire this morning, but has then given way to yet more rain. Lucky us. Moving on quickly. Now, we've had some questions coming in from a number of you about an article that's been in the newspapers this week and has caused a good amount of consternation from, you can imagine, all the usual UK newspapers that like to take this sort of outraged tone about the terrible events happening in our modern world. This question came in from Emma Freeman, amongst others, asking about the articles in all the newspapers referring to how one university, Reading University in the UK, has this week been sort of outed, as it were, for cutting lines from an ancient Greek poem that students in their first year of classical studies at the University of Reading would be studying, because the Reading University said they felt that these lines could be a trigger, and as a result that they did not want them to be accessed without a warning. First, a verbal warning, but then secondly, actually decided to remove them entirely from the study of this particular poem in case they were a trigger. Now, these lines came from a poem that was being studied, kind of an ancient poem talking about ancient perceptions of the different types of women. It is not a very positive about women poem, it has to be said, in any way, shape or form, by Semonides of Amorgos. But the particular lines that Reading University decided to take out were actually a reference to domestic violence. And this was the worry that they had, that while they could give a verbal trigger alert warning within the class about the text that they were beginning to read, it was felt that these particular lines went above and beyond sort of simple misogynistic cultural context of the ancient Greek, of that particular ancient Greek text, and could actually act as triggers. So a lot of people kind of have had strong opinions about this, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys think as well, as to kind of whether or not this is the kind of approach that can or should be adopted when dealing with ancient literature. Now, you can imagine what a number of the UK newspapers took. They took the stance of, the outrage that there isn't the same kind of moral backbone to study these texts that there used to be, accompanied with the idea of censorship, from universities, accompanied with the idea of over-mollycoddling and over-protecting the youth from reading these texts as they were initially and originally constructed. And of course, within the academic community itself, there has also been a number of responses, both supportive responses from some universities that have taken similar actions in relation to other texts, and indeed from other university academics who felt that this was the thin end of the wedge. Simply, where do you stop if you start wanting to censor some of the often very unculturally comfortable material that comes from the ancient Greek world? So what are your thoughts? Do let us know. From my perspective, it is a really difficult one, but I would tend to, in these times, side with the people who wish that the texts are studied in an unadulterated, uncut fashion. Students who are being exposed to these texts are students who have chosen to study the ancient world. They are thus actively signing up to engaging with the world that is culturally often quite different, and it often shocks. And we have to be very, very clear that this is not any kind of endorsement of a way of thinking about the world today, but instead an attempt to try and understand the values and aims and ideas of an ancient society, a sociological study, if you like, of a time past. So in that sense, I would urge people to try and read those texts in full, in context, but that obviously, of course, we each have our right to step away from a text if we are finding it, for one reason or another, too personally uncomfortable. And that's why I think the medium balance here is that the study of these kinds of texts, which do have particularly graphic descriptions or particularly violent descriptions in them, should be alerted to the fact, the class, that we're about to study something which does have a certain amount of X or Y in it, allowing students the opportunity to kind of step back a little if they want to. We can't change history, as some of the comments that are coming up here rightly say. We shouldn't try to airbrush history because that's not the job of historians. So kind of our job is to try and understand the past, warts and all, and offer it up to the present and the future as the best kind of learning tool that it can be. So that would be kind of my take on it. But thank you for your thoughts that are now coming in, absolutely, and for the strong views on both sides of this debate. It's a really, really tough one. So kind of it would be good to have your thoughts either now as part of this conversation or indeed on the Facebook page as well as we go through the week. But thank you, Emma, for bringing this up indeed. Now, the other question that we had in, which I've been meaning to get to for a little bit, takes us to another really interesting new area of classical study where there has been no shortage of difficult, controversial subjects that really do again, confront us with many of our own beliefs and problems and issues and predispositions. Actually, almost in some ways, in an inverse way to the issues we've just been talking about in regards to the text about the kind of derogatory references to women and particularly to domestic violence. If, in fact, actually we're thinking about the study of disability and particularly ancient disability. This is a relatively new field, and that speaks to itself about the way in which issues surrounding disability have not often made their way onto the front page of academic study for a number of reasons. But ancient disability studies is an increasingly important area because, as we have begun to realise, actually ancient disability was a much more prevalent and fundamental fact of life than we have previously given it credit for. We have sort of bought the lie, if you like, of all the ancient Greek perfect statues of people standing around, and instead ignored the reality that has been out there, that actually, in fact, a large percentage of, particularly the ancient Greek world, would have had some kind of disability, whether that came through poor diet and malnutrition, whether that then came through illness as a result of that, or whether that came through injury in war. And as a result, there have been lots of kind of really interesting studies that looking at and forcing us to recognise this much more prevalent aspect of the ancient world than we have hitherto given it credit for. Now, the question came in from Elizabeth Henriksen, been asking how disabled people were treated in ancient Greece, which we talked a little bit about in a previous Q&A. And it made her wonder if there were diabetes and other diseases, and ones we get from the way we live. And the answer is absolutely yes. So just as an important element of kind of creating this kind of a wave, kind of widespread kind of a range of disabilities within the ancient world was poor diet, poor sanitation, and thus the development of a whole series of diseases like arteriosclerosis, ulcers, stomach problems, all of these sorts of things, giving way to a series of longer-term medical problems. Now, not necessarily diabetes, because obviously sort of overconsumption of sugar, etc., was not a problem of the ancient diet, but actually there were a whole series of modern conditions which would have been going rampant through the ancient population. And this is a really useful time, Elizabeth, to have asked this question. Thank you very much indeed. Because, as has been flagged, a really great new article has come out and is actually available for public access, which is Dr. Debbie Sneed's article on disability and infanticide in ancient Greece, which was published last month in the journal Hesperia, fantastic American classics journal. And it is open access for the first 2 weeks of January. It's really, really worth kind of having a look at the Hesperia journal, where you'll be able to view and read the article for free without any kind of library inscription or university affiliation for these first 2 weeks of January. And this promulgation of open access for journals is another really new and exciting feature of kind of the way in which the academic world is changing, because increasingly the government is setting a direction directive for knowledge and the publication of knowledge to be accessible to all, not only those who are working within university contexts. And as such, increasingly the different research bodies that fund research within the UK are demanding that if you are producing research as a result of having been funded by government, by money from the government, and so from these different research councils, that you make that research open access for all. Now, this is quite a difficult thing to do, because if you think about it, here an academic writes a book or a journal article. They then go to a journal who have costs involved in getting that article ready for publication. There'll be the copy editing costs, proofing costs, typesetting costs, and then of course, if the journal is, as still many are within the classical world, actually published in print, there are the printing costs. Now, on top of that, if it's an article that requires images, there are all the image copyright costs, and those image copyright costs can be astronomically high depending on where the image rights are held. A little tip for you is that the Vatican tends to have the highest image publication costs of all, so avoid, if you possibly can, having to use an article or an image from the Vatican. So all of these costs combined go towards the sort of what is the cost of producing an academic article, and many of those costs are there even if the academic article is online, in order to ensure the rigour of an excellent high quality publication. So if we want to make it open access, this is a problem, because normally a journal, or indeed a publisher of books, so one of the university presses, would recoup those costs via the subscriptions for the journal that are paid, or via the book copies that are sold. But if you're going to make an article open access and thus free for all to use, how do you go about recouping those costs? And what we're seeing is nothing short of a fundamental revolution in the entire financial system underpinning academic publication, as more and more open access is being demanded and more strategies for offering open access are being created. And this is one of them, where there is an short open access period for a particular article before again it goes back behind that paywall, and you need a subscription to see it. So do get in while there is a chance to have a look at Debbie Sneed's article. Tracy asks, is that why academic books are so expensive? Yes, indeed. It depends entirely on the financial model, but it was explained to me like this, that if you, between a university press that is publishing a good number of books, but they are running in very small print runs, like academic books from university presses are often printed in small print runs of maybe just 500 copies. And so the individual cost of those books needs to be substantially higher than for a popular history or a public history book done by a trade press that would do an initial hardback run of, say, 10,000, if not many more, before then moving into the paperback, and so that they can bring the average cost per unit down. And it's often the case also that academic volumes require often quite complex typesetting and proofsetting and peer review processes as well. So there are lots of kind of hands involved in the different books. And then different university presses have different models for how they recoup, pass on, and gather those costs back. So yes, it's a very complex model, but we're seeing an absolute revolution here in open access that is slowly, and it's not going to go away. In fact, it's going to get more and more demanding. That at the moment this open access is really only applying to journal articles, but we are going to start to see it applying in the years to come to full volumes, monographs, books as well, which will be an even more interesting time. So thank you, Elizabeth, for your question. Thank you, Debbie, for your article. And we've got a little bit of time before we move on to a whole series of questions that have been flooding in around Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries. I get the feeling there might be some kind of either school or university topic being studied here around Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, because I've never seen such a cluster of questions all at the same same time. But we've got time to have a quick break for news items and then for also what's going on around about the classical world that you can get to see and hear. So some of the favourite articles that we've been putting up on the Facebook page for me in the past couple of weeks. There is a Roman ruins are providing building blocks for a Serbian village. We've heard some great stuff here about how bricks from the Roman world's constructions in central Serbia and the house and this is in central Serbia's Stari Kostolac, are on the outskirts of what was once a major Roman settlement and military garrison, then known as Viminacium, which I've actually visited. Now, Viminacium is an excellent site, and I would encourage you all to go to Serbia and to see Viminacium. There's an excellent, last time I was there, not only are they great ruins, but they even had a Roman legionary dressed up outside some of them as well. But individual families, kind of going back several generations, have suddenly realised that they've actually been appropriating some of the ancient Roman stonework to build some of the houses in their own villages. So there we go, kind of the ancient is now rebuilding the modern. I kind of like that, and it's something that's been happening since the ancient time itself. The Guardian talks about how the US is beginning the return of $10 million worth of antiquities stolen from Italy. So 200 antiquities, including an ancient Roman sculpture that almost ended up in the possession of Kim Kardashian West, are now being returned that were stolen and smuggled out of Italy. It's a variety of Roman, Etruscan and Greek artefacts that have been looted going back early as the 1980s. Now, I think there are two remarkable things about this news item. One is, of course, that there's such a huge hoard, an expensive hoard of statues is being returned, and as a result, a blow is being dealt to the business of looting, stealing and fencing ancient artefacts. But secondly, that Kim Kardashian West may well have been and is seemingly interested in collecting ancient Roman sculpture. So I did not know this at all. I think this says great things about their character, and that we should encourage a public display, online virtual gallery tour of the Kim Kardashian West sculptural oeuvre, and maybe, I mean, who knows what they seem to be basing themselves off and whether they see a connection for themselves with ancient Greek statuary, ancient Greek and Roman statuary. Then from the Daily Mail, a long-lost temple of Hercules has been discovered off the coast of Spain. So this is down in the Bay of Cadiz, where now this new temple for the god Hercules, of course Heracles is known, the demigod himself. Now this is a temple, or at least a site here, dedicated to Temple Hercules Gaditanus. It's mentioned in ancient records dating back to very early on, many centuries BC. And archaeologists now believe that a collection of submerged structures just off the coast are the long-lost temple. So not only is this a great story of finding an ancient temple, but it's a great story of underwater archaeology as well, which is as you know, well worth it. Alexis thinks that Kim Kardashian could be in this group under a fake name. Who knows? Who knows? In fact, she could be a follower of the Michael Scott and be in the Community Classics group as well. Maybe she is. Maybe she is. Come on, Kim Kardashian West. Let us know if you are really here. Tracy says, I'm here. I knew it was you. I knew it was you. Maybe we should reach out and invite her here to be a guest on the Q&A. I'm sure we'll get through her agent and her extra agent and her third agent and her fourth agent and be able to join us so that she can talk to us about her love of ancient Greek statuary. I think this would be a brilliant idea. From BBC News, this year is the 1900th anniversary of Hadrian's Wall, the building of Hadrian's Wall, and there's going to be a year-long festival that runs from the 24th of January right through until the 23rd of December. That's with over 150 events celebrating the joys of Hadrian's Wall. So make sure you can get to it if you can. You can't all be sitting there now claiming you're Kim Kardashian West. I'll start not to believe you. But if then other great stuff that's come up that I wanted to flag with you is the discovery of the time capsule time capsule as in great well-preserved archaeological layers that can be securely dated, in that sense, a time capsule, just on the Turkish coast by the modern resort of Kesme, which is about 100 miles away from the Greek island of Santorini, ancient Thera, where, of course, there was the famous volcanic eruption destroying, covering Akrotiri, but also sending out, we think, volcanic ash clouds and a tsunami wave that really put paid to a huge amount of civilization at the time, particularly in the Greek world, but also on the Turkish coast. And this is what this time capsule is referring to: layers of volcanic ash and destruction and the discovery of a skeleton of a boy and a dog, all securely dated to this period, showing that seemingly not only was there volcanic debris, but also the destruction caused by tsunami at precisely this time that then led to the community that were based on the Turkish coast around Kesme being abandoned for almost a century. So it's really good evidence for the widespread nature of destruction that we've thought happened around about the time as a result of the Thera eruption. And then another particular favourite of mine from Ekaterini in the site of Epidavros, heavy rains, can you believe it, heavy rains in Greece, I can't believe it at all, have actually helped them uncover a totally unknown female Roman statue. The heavy rains exposed the base of the statue, that was then dug up and exposed and brought out for all to enjoy just on December 16th, an early Christmas present for those at Epidavros. So some great things happening in news around the world. And then what's coming up in terms of activities? Well, if you happen to be in Lytham St Anne's next week on Thursday the 13th of January, come and see me. Yes, I'm up there in Lytham St Anne's. We are able to go ahead in person doing my Lytham St Anne's annual presidential lecture, and I cannot wait to be back up there with the Lytham St Anne's gang, having had to do this online last year. We will be there. We're talking about an island without an anchor, Delos and the ancient world. Come and join us. We're taking over the Lower Pavilion. This is a bigger venue in Lytham St Anne's than I've ever done before. Very excited about it indeed. And of course, there's a dinner afterwards as well. So do come along and get your tickets for that. Then on the 18th of February in London, I'm going to be at the Science Museum alongside Alice Roberts and the Assassin's Creed Odyssey team, as well as those who have been uncovering ships at the bottom of the Black Sea to talk about how modern technology reveals the ancient past. So do come and join us for that. On the 9th of March, Mary Beer is going to be talking about the 12 Caesars with Charlotte Higgins in a live Guardian Live event. And on the 23rd of January, even sooner than that, Classics Now, The Future of the Past is an exciting new cultural festival online in Dublin and beyond between the 21st and the 23rd of January. So do get involved with that. In terms of podcasts that are out there, some absolutely brilliant stuff. The History Hit podcast is doing one on the ancients, how to party like a Roman. I think we all need that as we go into dry January. And then on TV, as one of you has already mentioned, Sarah mentioned the new Digging for Britain series with Alice Roberts starting on the 4th of January, so just started a day or two ago. Do get involved with that. And of course, in terms of books that are coming out, Nina Ramirez has got Goddesses, 50 Goddesses, Spirits, Saints and Other Female Figures Who Have Shaped Belief, that's coming out in mid-February. And little drum roll for a pre-announcement here, coming this April will be a new book from me, a new edited book from me that I've been working with a fabulous team at BBC Books on, called The Story of the Ancient World. So that should be published in April time. More details to follow on the Facebook page. And in just about a year's time, it's going to be very exciting. I'm going to bring out my new book, X Marks the Spot. So already get yourself ready for that in 2023. If there's not enough already, great stuff going on in 2022. Do we have time for one final question? Yes, we do, but it probably won't be the Panhellenic Sanctuaries question. I'm so sorry if this was on a time-specific kind of response that was needed for projects, kind of final year projects. I know at least one of you is doing a final year project as a third-year classic students at KCL, but kind of hopefully we can answer these next time. So we will keep the Panhellenic Sanctuary questions from Stefania, from Alan, and also regarding sanctuaries from Alexis Brown for next time. But we will finish off with this, which is from Lorraine Eggleston, which is talking about documentaries about Troy. Have I made any? And if not, can I recommend a recent one that has credible facts? Wow. I did, Lorraine, make a documentary. Well, it was sort of about Troy, or at least we visited Troy. It was one of the first documentaries I ever did back in 2008-9. And if you can believe it, it was called Ancients Behaving Badly. And it was for the History Channel. And it was a documentary where we took key historical figures that in many ways could be thought to have behaved badly. I did programs about Alexander the Great and Cleopatra. We went to some of the great locations that they lived in, worked in, travelled through, fought their way through, and then we looked at their psychological profiles, and then that was taken to a modern psychologist who kind of analysed them for all the sort of issues and problems that no doubt they had, and put them on an ancient kind of a graph to compare the different psychotic tendencies of some of the ancient world's greatest figures. So Alexander the Great took us to Troy, where Alexander the Great passed through, of course, on his conquests going east, and supposedly also visited the tomb where the armour of Achilles was kept and picked it up and took it off with him. Troy is an incredibly difficult site to film because it is, as a modern site today, just so confusing. There are so many layers of cities, one on top of the other, and it's almost impossible to make any sense of it, I think, just with plain documentary style. I think there is a really good book, though, that I would recommend you to, which is Nisha McSweeney's, a colleague of mine from PhD days and onwards, and that's written Troy Myth City Icon. So Nisha McSweeney's Troy Myth City Icon I would definitely recommend. And of course, many of you might have had a chance to get to the good old exhibition at the British Museum about Troy, which I think did extremely well to try and break apart those levels and help us understand the city a little bit better. Lara, is Troy history or legend? It is both. There is both definitely a place that can be associated with Troy and shown to have had a battle kind of around about the time that we expect there would have been a historical battle which then got morphed up into the story of the Iliad. But of course, Troy of the Iliad is also a place of legend. So can you get hold of this documentary, Ancients Behaving Badly? I suspect it might be on YouTube, but I'll leave it there and I'm not going to try and take any of you to it. But all I can say is I was very young. I was very young indeed. And on that note, when are we meeting next time? 20th of January, 5 p.m. in 2 weeks' time. I will see you on Thursday, the 20th of January, 5 p.m. 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much for your time today. It's a pleasure to have you with us as always. Have a wonderful first couple of weeks of January. Stay safe, stay well. Look forward to seeing you then. We'll get stuck into Pan-Hellenic sanctuaries, I promise. And in the meantime, I'll try and get in touch with Kim Kardashian West and we'll see if we can get her on the programme. Of course, yes, Michael Wood in the footsteps of Alexander the Great, a great 1990s documentary TV series. Absolutely worth saying. Thank you, Alexis, for popping that on our kind of feed as well. And look after yourselves. We'll see you all soon. Take care.